life? You guys doing good? Awesome. Hey, do me a favor and give those that are watching us right now live a warm round of applause and just say thanks for being a part of our time together this morning. We appreciate you guys and just looking forward to what God has in store for us. And for those of you who are watching us right now, we just want you to know that God has great plans in store for each and every one of you. And I'm excited about this series that we began last week called Squad Goals. I don't know about you, when you watch that video, it just kind of makes you want to go on vacation. It just kind of makes you want to get away, doesn't it? Well, one of the things that we're learning is we're learning how to do life with the people really that matter the most to us. You know, when you think about squads, the people that we hang out with, relationships matter. And when you think about the relationships that matter the most, you know, obviously last weekend, in fact, my wife, Michelle, joined me as we talked about making the most of your relationship between you and your spouse, your squad mate. And so we talked about some things as it relates to that. We also are talking today specifically about the family squad. Because all of us here today obviously are part of a family, and not just a spiritual family, but even on the human level, we all come from different situations, backgrounds. When you think about the family, especially in today's culture, it's very, very unique. I'm speaking to a group of people today, and based on some of your backgrounds, maybe you grew up in a blended family situation, a single family situation. In fact, it's almost rare to even meet people this day and age who are still a part of what would be referred to as a traditional family. And so regardless of what the dynamics might look like for you, regardless of what the personalities might represent, the family squad is a very unique and a very real and yet a very powerful plan that God has put together. I'm often intrigued by asking people the question, why they think we use the color orange for our church. Have you ever wondered that when you walk through the front door of our church, especially here at our Conway location? Have you ever noticed when you walk in, you see this like bright, obnoxious, orange-looking wall? Have you ever wondered to yourselves, like, who's their designer? Who came up with this obnoxious orange color? Well, we intentionally use the color orange. And the reason why is because when you think about the color orange, it represents two primary colors. You take the primary color of yellow, and what does the yellow represent? It represents the light of the church. When you take the color red, the primary color of red, what does it represent? It represents the heart of the home. When you take the church and you take the home, the two most powerful institutions that God ever created, and you blend them together, what do you get? You get the color orange. So we're an orange church. Why? Because we have a passion for families. We believe with all of our heart, so goes the family, so goes the church. So goes the church, so goes the community. So goes the community, so goes the rest of the country. So goes the rest of our country, so goes the rest of the world. So it all begins with family. And that's the reason why we're talking about hashtag squad goals, because we're talking about the family squad. And so if you were here last week, I would encourage you to jot down some notes. If you missed it, you can go online and catch the message that Michelle and I did. But I want to share with you a key thought that I think is so incredibly important. It's really something that it's kind of just it runs through the thread. It's the thread that runs through this entire series as it relates to relationships. And here's a key thought. Every relationship must begin with the end in mind. Every relationship, your marriage, relationship between you and your kids, even your coworkers, every relationship you have must begin with the end in mind. Reason why that's so important is because good relationships, great relationships, they just don't automatically happen. You have to work at it. You have to be intentional. And so when you think about the things that we have to do, the things we have to prioritize in order to make our relationships great, then we have to give a lot of strategic forethought into what we do and how we do it, and even why we do it when it comes to establishing those life-giving, healthy, productive relationships. I love what Andy Stanley says. Direction, not intention, determines your destination. Let me put it to you like this. The direction you're currently headed right now in your life, your marriage, your family, the direction In other words, the choices that you have made that has charted out the course, the direction of your life. Doesn't matter how sincere your intentions might be, but the current direction of your life right now, your current family, your current marriage, the direction it is headed, regardless of your intentions, will ultimately determine your destination. That's why every relationship must begin with the end in mind. So what's the grand goal? What's the ultimate picture? What's the vision for our relationships, for your marriage, for your relationships between you and your kids, between you and your parents? So at the end of the day, every relationship must begin with the end in mind. And here's what Joshua said. Joshua came to the end of his life. He had fought many battles. He was the one whom God used to eventually take the people of Israel, across the Jordan and inherit the land that God had promised. So here he was, in many ways, kind of giving his final speech. He was reminding the people of Israel about all the things they'd overcome, all the setbacks that they had endured. But because of God's plans being fulfilled in their lives, he wanted them to remember all the good things that God had promised, that God had made true all the promises. Not a single promise that God made, listen, not one of them didn't happen. They all happened. And he was reminding them how important it was that they continue to serve the Lord with all of their hearts. And so he said, once again in Joshua 24, verses 14 and 15, he said, "So fear the Lord and serve him wholeheartedly, and put away forever the idols your ancestors worshipped when they lived beyond the Euphrates River in Egypt. And serve the Lord alone. But if you refuse to serve the Lord, then choose today whom you will serve." In other words, make a decision about your future. Choose today, because every relationship must begin with the end in mind, he's saying. But he's saying this. He said, but if you refuse to serve the Lord, then choose today whom you will serve. Would you prefer the gods your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates? Or will it be the gods of the Amorites in whose land you now live? But notice what he said. But as for me and my family, we will serve who? The Lord. So Joshua once again was emphasizing the fact that if you want to serve the Lord wholeheartedly, if you want the end goal, the end destination to result in a family or in a marriage or in a personal relationship in your friendships with others to thrive and to be all that God intended for it to be, then we must invite God into our squad. We got to make him the single most important priority and passion of our hearts and our lives. And so today, let's make that our goal. That as far as we are concerned, as far as me and my house, me and my spouse, me and my kids, me and my friends, as far as we are concerned, hey, we're going to serve the Lord. Amen? So let's make that our passion. Let's make that our priority. So here are three things that I want to share with you. Here are three squad goals that I believe are so vitally important that's going to help us achieve the end result. And that is this. Number one, if you're taking notes, squad goal number one is we need to connect. We need to learn how to connect. Now, I love what John Maxwell, the great author and speaker and leadership, I love what he says. He says, everybody communicates, but few connect. We live in a world today that is all into communication. I mean, cell phones and texting, and now you got social media. I mean, it's crazy. It's just, we're consumed with it. We're consumed with it. And so everybody's communicating. Communication is not the problem. The problem is everybody communicates, but very, very few actually connect. In other words, enter into one another's world. Now, last week was Valentine's Day, and my wife, Michelle, and I, we went on a Valentine's Day. And so we went to one of our favorite restaurants in all of Orlando, and it was a beautiful, some of you remember, it was a beautiful evening, gorgeous sunset. This place where we went just so happened to be, filled with beautiful oak trees, overlooked the lake, and man, it was just an incredible scene. And so we had about a 45-minute wait before our table was going to be ready. So we just kind of took it all in. So we just kind of hung out outside and just kind of took in the atmosphere. And so they had all these little benches, and the chairs. And so we just sat out there. We found a little love seat. It was Valentine's, so a little twosome. And so we just sat down on this little seat. And, we had some, people take some pictures of us. And then, of course, you got to take a selfie. So, we get our cell phone out. And so, we're kind of doing this, we're getting the selfie, doing this little action and all that kind of stuff. And so, after we take our little picture, our little selfie, I'm now all of a sudden taking my attention away from Michelle. And here's what I'm doing. I'm looking at my cell phone as we're sitting on our love seat. And guess what I'm doing? I'm doing this right here. And after about 2 or 3 minutes of just doing this, I'm communicating. But she didn't care about what I was communicating or who I was communicating with. What she was wanting was for me to connect with her. And so she, in a very lovingly Valentine's night way, said, "So how's everybody else's world tonight?" So I took the hint, put the cell phone in my pocket, and I tried to enter into her world, to connect. And unfortunately, that's a lost art. For most of us, when we are running here and there and everywhere, we've got 1,000,001 different things going. We got multiple plates spinning, and we're all communicating. Man, we're multitasking, and man, we can drive, and man, we can text at the same time, and we can do all these different things. But how often do we connect and enter into one another's world? Philippians 2, verse 4 says it like this. Paul said, "Don't look out only for your own interest, but take an interest in others too." Here are 3 things that you can do to enter into each other's world. Whether you're married, whether you have kids, doesn't matter. You can do these 3 things. Number 1 is show affection. Best way to enter into someone's world, the best way to connect with someone is by simply showing affection to them. Now, one of the things that sociologists and psychologists will tell us that the human touch conveys confidence and security in one's life. And it's crazy how easy and natural that is to do that for a baby, for a toddler. I mean, they're easy to love. They're easy to to embrace. They're easy to show that kind of affection to. But yet when that little toddler becomes a teenager, it becomes a little more awkward. May not be awkward for you, but it's awkward for them. They go with the Heisman Trophy on you. They give you the stiff arm. You know what I'm saying? They say, "Hey, no." And so, they look at you like you're weird or something because you're wanting just to show a little affection. But here's the thing: at the end of the day, affection means so much. And even though it may not come natural to you, in fact, it's obviously for some it's easier than for others. For example, like my wife Michelle, her greatest single emotional need is security. And so one of the ways that she feels secure is when I just physically show my affection toward her, because it helps her just see the value that I place on her, and because I'm entering into her world and I'm helping reinforce something that's so important to her, it gives her the reassurance and the sense of security, knowing that I love her more than anything else. And this is the same is true as a parent if you have kids. In fact, here's my challenge. So here's if you're watching, listen, here's my homework assignment for you. If you have how many of you have teenagers? All right. Here's what you do. Tonight, before they go to bed, don't say a word. Just walk into the room. Unannounced, just walk into the room. Now, you may want to knock before you go in. You never know what you're walking into. But walk in, okay? Walk in. Walk in the room without saying a word, okay? Here's what I want you to do. I want you to just walk up to them. I want you to hug them, embrace them, hold them for about 3 to 5 seconds. And let me tell you what's going to happen. After you physically embrace them, then I want you to tell them, "I love you." They're going to look at you confused and dazed, and they're going to say, "What drugs are you on?" You know why? Because that's so important. So if you want to connect, if you want to enter into one another's world, show affection. Another thing is just simply show attention. You see, affection is a way of giving attention, but sometimes, again, it's the connection. It's just having meaningful conversations. It's having the opportunity to show that, hey, you matter. In fact, the average parent spends less than 14 minutes a week in meaningful conversation with their kids. So don't take one another for granted. Take the time to show attention. And the third thing is just, listen, find a way to be adventurous. Bring some adventure into your relationships. In other words, make memories that matter. Listen, sometimes we think, oh, well, I'm going to this practice and I'm going to this competition and, we're going to this tournament and we're doing this and we're doing that. And all that's great, but don't substitute those things for just the fun and the laughter and the enjoyment you have as a family, where you just connect and you enter into one another's world. Enjoy the journey. Enjoy the journey. So one of the squad goals that we need to make in our family squad, number one is to connect. Number two is to grow. I love the fact that as families, we actually can grow, we can mature, we can develop in becoming what God intended for us to be. And I believe this all in my heart. The family that grows together stays together. And so we have to be intentional in the way that we grow. Listen, do not do the same thing. Do not do the same thing. Do not live the same way every day for 75 years and call it a life. Listen, make a commitment to grow. Don't be at the same place you are in your life, in your marriage, in your family relationships a year from today. No, be further down the path spiritually, relationally, mentally, emotionally. Listen, grow in every area of your life. I love what Psalm 115 verses 14 and 15 says. May the Lord cause you to flourish, both you and your children. May you be blessed by the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. I want to talk to all the ladies for just a second. All the ladies, let me see your hands real quick. The reason why I want to speak to the ladies for just a moment is because you have an incredible opportunity to grow and to flourish in your life in 2 weeks through our Rethink Pink Women's event. And if you haven't signed up or registered, let me encourage you to do that today. You can go online and you can text. Okay, you can simply text, to register. You can go out to the lobby today, to the Rethink Pink booth. But here's the reason why I want to encourage you to take advantage of this opportunity. Because there's only a few times a year, ladies, where you have an opportunity like this for literally just 24 hours, where you can unplug and you can just connect and position yourself relationally and spiritually and even emotionally to be able to connect and to grow in your life. There's not a woman here that does not need life-giving relationships. There's not a woman here that does not need encouragement and inspiration and hope in every area of your life. And I'm telling you, I believe there's a message that God has for you, and it's a message of hope and inspiration and encouragement. And listen, it could be the catalyst that can help you in your spiritual journey and even in your relational journey to really flourish this year of 2017. Listen, we're just still getting started. Don't just say, oh, well, the whole New Year's resolution things, but no. We have the whole year ahead of us. Let's maximize the opportunities to flourish, to become all that God has called us to be. And so we encourage you to do that. And here's the thing, the first step towards growing is to simply decide that I am not going to stay at the same place that I'm currently at. That's it. I love what the scripture says in Luke 2:52. Jesus grew in wisdom, that's intellectually. He grew in stature, that's physically. He grew in favor with God, that's spiritually. And he grew with all the people, that's socially and relationally. God wants you, and he wants me, he wants us, Listen, he wants us to grow in the same way. And here's what I've been doing ministry for a long time. Over 25, nearly 30 years, I've been in ministry. 16 of it has been in pastoring. Spoken to all kinds of people. And what I'm about to say, I mean this with all sincerity of my heart, but I say it with a broken heart. Most of the problems that adults have in their lives are a direct result of specific life skills they never learned correctly from their childhood. I know that's a big statement, but let me share this with you. I would encourage you, listen, I would encourage you, if you are a family, regardless of what age children you have, it's never too late to start doing what is right. It's never too late to start doing what's right. And what you need to understand, there's grace in this place. Well, you need to understand that we serve a good God whose mercies are fresh and new each and every day. You need to be encouraged the fact that yesterday ended last night. That means today's pages are totally blank. Amen. And so what that allows us to do is to be the model for our children that we needed growing up as a kid. So here's my encouragement to you. I encourage you today to teach your kids these 5 life skills while they're still in your home, if your kids are still at home. And here they are. Write these down. This is so important. Number 1, teach them how to handle their emotions. Kids need to know how to deal with how they feel. And if they don't learn that in a healthy way at home, I promise you they're not going to learn it out there in the world. In fact, they'll be trying to figure out how to deal with the damaged emotions of their lives. It's like the old saying, it's easier to build boys and girls than it is to repair men and women. So we need to understand the importance of teaching our kids life skills such as how to handle their emotions. Number 2, teach your kids how to handle conflict. You can go to Amazon and purchase a book I wrote called We Can Work It Out, on how to handle conflict with your kids. I wrote that book after speaking to nearly 3 million students because I ran into so many kids who just struggled in conflict, and I met so many parents who struggle in conflict with their kids. They're just, like this. There's a way to deal with conflict in a healthy, Christ-centered, life-giving way. And so we've got to learn that while we're at home so we can learn how to deal with conflict out there in the real world. Number 3, help your kids. And by the way, the whole thing about conflict is so important. There are 2 kinds of people. In fact, there are 2, the reason I say there are 2 kinds of people, because these 2 people handle conflict in 2 radically different ways. You have turtles and you have skunks. Skunks, needless to say, they just spew. When they get angry and there's in the moment of confrontation, what do? They just spray ugly, stinky stuff everywhere. It just fills up the whole room. It's obvious. But then you have the turtles. And the turtles, you know what they do? They just pull themselves inside their little shell. They withdraw and they hide because they don't want to have to deal with the conflict. But here's the problem. The problem is skunks always marry turtles. So you got to learn how to deal with the conflict. And the sooner the better, amen? So it's important that we learn how to do that. Number 3, how to handle failure and loss. Kids need to know how to handle failure and loss, rejection, betrayal. They need to know how to handle that. Listen, they're not going to win every game. They're not going to win every competition. They're not going to be 4.0 grade point average. They're not going to be valedictorians. They're not going to be MVP. They're not going to win every single time in their life. They got to learn how to lose. They got to learn how to fail. And it's okay to fail. It's okay to take risk. I love what Wayne Gretzky said. In fact, I was at school the other day, with a group of pastors meeting with a principal, and I saw this, it was painted on the wall, it's powerful. Wayne Gretzky says this: you miss 100% of the shots you never take. We need to help our kids take risks, set goals, strive for greatness. But in the midst of doing that, they also have to learn to know that when they miss or they fall or they fail, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. Listen, you are not what happened to you. They've got to learn how to overcome the difficulties and setbacks in their lives. It's okay to fail. Just make sure that when you fall forward. You learn from your mistakes. Number 4, we got to teach them how to live by core values that matter. Teach them core values that matter: integrity, honesty, generosity, loyalty. Listen, whatever those things matter to you as a family, whatever important to you, teach them. Help kids to know, listen, what is important, what principles they should live their lives by. What are the non-negotiables in their life? And then 5thly, how to establish good habits. Michelle talked a little bit about this last week. It's the principle of 5. What are the 5 things we're going to do every day? These are the non-negotiables. These, regardless of what happens, these are the 5 things that I'm going to commit to every day. The reason why establishing good habits are so vitally important is because it's a reflection of our character. So when you sow a habit, you reap what? You reap a character. And so it's important that we understand that these kind of life skills are not going to be taught. They're not going to learn it in school. They can do algebra and biology and chemistry, and they'll learn all that in school, but no one's going to teach them how to deal with these kinds of issues. And that's the reason why it's so important that moms and dads invite God into their family squad and say, for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord, and we're going to grow together as a family, because the family that grows together stays together. And here are 2 ways you can help your kids. Number 1 is by example. Luke 6 verse 40 says it like this: students are not greater than their teacher, but the student who is fully trained will become like his teacher. My dad used to say it this way: son, the little monkey always does what the big monkey does. And that's true. It's monkey see, monkey do. So moms and dads, it's important that once again we be the example for our children that we needed growing up as a kid. And then secondly, we not only show them and teach them and help them through example, but through conversations. I love what Deuteronomy 6 says: and you must love the Lord your God with all of your heart, all of your soul, all your strength, and you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I'm giving you today. And then here's the key: repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you're at home, and when you're on the road, and when you're going to bed, and when you're getting up. In other words, just throughout the ordinary life pattern and lifestyle, make that a teachable opportunity as you go. Tie them to your hands and wear them on your foreheads as reminders, and write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. I would encourage every parent, at some point you ought to buy the book called Right from Wrong. It's a classic. It was written many years ago by a guy by the name of Josh McDowell, simply called Right from Wrong. And here's what's so powerful about that book. And this is something that I learned many, many years ago, and thankfully from my parents, and it's something I've worked very hard, Michelle and I have worked very hard to help with our own children, and that is to always understand the why behind the what. It's one thing to tell our kids, don't do that, or you shouldn't do that, or that's not right, or that's wrong. Well, that's okay, but what they're asking is, well, why is that wrong? Why is that not right? Why shouldn't I do that? And here's the thing that book teaches in a nutshell. Every precept, that is a command in the Bible, has a principle behind it. The principle is the why behind the what. The what's the command. The principle is the why behind the command. It's the why behind the what. But behind every precept and behind every principle is the person of God. It all comes back to the very nature and person of who God is. And so one of the things that's so important is that we realize that, listen, kids need to know and they need to learn. And as moms and dads, listen, the difference between where we are and where we desire to be is what we know. And so let's be committed to growing and developing and maturing and ultimately becoming whom God created us to be as a family squad. Amen? So how do we reach the destination? If every relationship begins with the end in mind, how do we get there? Well, one of the things we talked about is by simply connecting. The second thing we talked about is simply through the opportunity to grow. We talked about some life skills. We talked about two great ways to help reinforce that through example and through conversations. And then the third is to protect. So connect, grow, protect. Nehemiah 4, verse 14 says it like this. After I looked over, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers, your sons, and your daughters, your wives, and your homes. It was Nehemiah. He was trying to rebuild the wall, to fortify the city. Why? Because Jerusalem and the temple had been broken down. Enemies had come in and destroyed it. God had put it upon Nehemiah's heart to go back and rebuild the walls and help reconstruct the temple and to do all he could to help fortify the city where everybody was opposed. And the people, unfortunately, became discouraged, became defeated, and they were even intimidated by the opposing forces on the outside. But he helped them to understand the why behind the what. He wanted them to be driven by a vision because God had a plan and he had a purpose for his people. And listen, one of the things that we have to realize is that we have an opposing force that's constantly working against us. The enemy is out to do what? To steal, kill, and destroy. He wants to take everything from you. He wants to rob you of everything that you've longed for. And he'll do whatever it takes. He's relentless. He won't stop. And we've got to realize that, listen, we got to wage war against the enemy. We cannot be passive. We got to be proactive and do everything we can to fight for our sons and our daughters and for our wives and for our husbands. Why? Because we are fighting a real enemy, and we have to be reminded that, listen, when we go out and we fight, we got to put on the whole armor of God. We got to be protected and shielded from the fiery darts the enemy is going to be constantly throwing at us. We have competing values coming against us. Listen, we have so much temptation coming against us. We have so many things that the enemy uses to distract us, to derail us, to discourage us, to defeat us, but we got to remind ourselves that greater is he that is in us than he that is in the world. If God be for us, then who can be against us? Let's be the umbrella and let's be the raincoat for the children as they go out and they weather through the storms of life, and give them something that they can stand on, that God uses to protect them to become all that he destined for them to be. And so listen, don't give up. Don't give up. I love what Galatians 6:9 says. Don't give up. Don't grow weary in doing good. Because in just the right time, you will reap a harvest if you don't give up. So moms and dads, you know and I know, I got 3 kids. I got a 21-year-old, got an 18-year-old, got a 16-year-old. I'm in the thick of it. I'm in the most expensive season of my life right now. It's killing me. It is killing me. But don't grow weary in doing good. Don't quit on your kids. My mom and dad, I'm going to make this as short as I can. I'm going to close in prayer. My mom and dad came from some very difficult times. My mom married my dad on her 15th birthday. She knew 6 fathers in her life. My dad was 17 when he married my mom. He was in and out of jail, druggie, gang leader. Both radically got saved. And a couple invited them to come and live with them. They stayed in their garage apartment as newlyweds right after they gave their lives to Jesus, and this couple began to mentor them, pour life into them, just discipled them, shepherd them. And they weren't perfect parents by any means. My dad was a preacher. He was gone all the time, traveled all over the country. My mom was pretty much left with the responsibility of raising 4 sons. I was the youngest of the 4. My oldest brother was strung out on alcohol and drugs, and he was told by my dad to never come back home until he got right with God. Fortunately, in his mid-20s, he gave his life to Jesus, and Jesus radically changed his life. And today, my brother is serving the Lord. And today, my brother has a beautiful, incredible family. They're all serving the Lord. They have a heart for the house. They have a heart for Jesus. My second to the oldest brother, Paul, the same situation. In fact, you'd kill me for saying this. Hope you're not watching, Paul. But he actually got kicked out of the #1 party school in the nation. That's pretty hard to do. At that time, it was written up in a magazine, #1 party school in America, and I won't name the college. But strung out, messed up, gave his life to Christ when in his mid-20s. Today, my brother Paul is in full-time ministry, traveling the country, helping churches grow and reach their potential. My brother Rick was an incredible athlete, played college football, started coaching major college football. And while he was a college football coach, God radically changed his life. God later called him into the ministry. Today, my brother Rick is being used of God all over the world to preach the gospel. I idolized my 3 older brothers. And sadly to say, I didn't give my life to Christ until I was 18 years of age. But thankfully, on April 22nd, 1984, I gave my life to Jesus, and I've never been the same since. I'm telling you all that to say that whatever you do as moms and dads, regardless of the situation, the circumstances that you're facing and the burdens that you carry, maybe because of a prodigal son or prodigal daughter who's not where they could be or should be spiritually in their lives, don't quit on them. Don't throw in the towel. Listen, don't give up. You keep praying, you keep pushing, you keep persisting, and you keep protecting as they walk through the storms of life. Because I promise you, you sow, God will bring a harvest. You be faithful, and as you are faithful, God will be faithful, and he'll give you the desires of your heart. Remember, every relationship must begin with the end in mind. Let's bow our heads together in prayer.